everyone, and welcome. In this video we are checking out the 2019 Hyundai Veloster N. I am in Germany. Why am I in Germany? Well, we did spend some time driving around the Nürburgring, and we checked out Hyundai's motorsport division, which is based here in Germany. So, they do have a development center at the ring, and they also develop their racing programs for the World Rally Championship as well as touring cars here in Germany. So we're checking out the 2019 Veloster N. This car has a 2-liter turbocharged engine. It is a twin-scroll turbocharger, producing, depending on which option you get, and we're going to get into the differences here, but there is a base model and then there's a performance package. So with the base model, you're getting 250 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. With the performance package, you're getting 275 horsepower, same amount of torque. The engine also has a variable induction system, so there's 2 pathways that the air can travel depending on the RPM, so they're optimizing it. And there is a fairly broad torque range, so peak torque is from 1450 RPM all the way to 4000 RPM. Now that power is sent through a 6-speed manual transmission. There's only one transmission currently offered, which is the manual. Fairly close ratios, and it's fairly short throws as well with this. And there are 2 final drives, which is a bit interesting. So again, depending on if you get the base or if you get the performance package, you get different final drives for both of those final drives. And so the first final drive is for gears 1, 2, and reverse, and the second is for 3 through 6. And so if you do get the performance package, gears 1 and 2 are about 4% more aggressive, slightly more torque, and then gears 3 through 6 are about 2% more aggressive, so just slightly more torque, but again, you do have more power with the performance package as well. As you can hear there, it does have downshift rev matching, which you can enable or disable right here on the steering wheel. There's a little rev button, and then there are different driving modes as well. So depending on which driving mode you're in is how aggressive that rev matching will be. If you're out racing on a track, you put it in N mode, it's going to respond a bit quicker than if you're just kind of puttering around town. It won't, launch the revs quite as fast. Nice little pops there. As far as the suspension, it is an electronically controlled suspension, so it varies depending on which mode you are in. And also, there's a difference between the base version as well as the performance package. So the performance package actually has a smaller anti-roll bar in the front, 21 millimeters versus 23 millimeters versus the base version. And part of this has to do with the fact that the performance version also comes with an electronic limited slip diff versus the base coming with an open differential, and they use the brakes for torque vectoring. So with the performance package, the reason they went to a slightly smaller front anti-roll bar was that they were attempting to reduce understeer, have the car a bit more neutral if you do go for the performance package, and then keep it a bit on the safer side on the understeer side, but very stiff, very responsive if you do just stick with the base version. One of the things I do like that they've done is they've paired this car really well with the tires. So you get good tire options, which I'm happy to see. Plenty of cars out there, they don't give you enough tire. This will give you enough tire stock. So the base car comes with Michelin Pilot Super Sports, and then if you go for the optional performance package, you get a slightly larger wheel, 19 versus 18 inch, and you get slightly wider 235 Pirelli P0s. And these Pirelli P0s were developed specifically for this car, so they've got a little HN moniker on the side of them. I was driving on them yesterday around the ring, 2 laps, heated laps, about 10-minute laps, and I wasn't noticing, any degradation in the performance of the tires. They did really well. The understeer was not bad. That was surprising to me. And also what was surprising is just coming out of corners, I wasn't getting much tire spin from the front axle. So, cornering hard and then putting the power down, that front limited slip diff did a nice job, and the tires honestly were quite good. So I like that they've put nice tires on it and they allow you to get the performance out of it. Now, speaking of tires, in Europe, they're actually going to offer Trofeo Rs as an option with a lightweight wheel. And part of what they did to the body of this car is they changed it to make sure that it could handle cup tires. So there's some body rigidity which they added, which I was speaking with the engineers about, and they were saying, on the standard tires, you're not going to notice it. It's not going to have an effect. But because they want this to be trackable, they put in these additional stiffeners. So if you are using a tire that has more grip and you're hitting higher lateral Gs, it's of course going to put more demand on the body of the car. And so they stiffened it up specifically specifically if you are to go with track tires and take this thing out on a track and hit higher G corners than you might typically. Now, as far as the brakes, they didn't go with any fancy outside companies. There are not Brembos on this. Instead, they decided to keep things cost effective. So what they did was they took larger brakes from a heavier model Hyundai and they stuck them on this. So this car is only weighing about 3,100 pounds with the performance package. If you get the base, it's a little over 3,000 pounds. So about just slightly lighter than a Volkswagen GTI, depending on which one you get. And it has, pretty large, over 13-inch brakes up front, ventilated front and rear with the performance package, ventilated in the front on the base car, and solid in the back with the base model. Okay, so you may hear a few pops from the exhaust there. This is kind of a cool thing which they've done, and it's most prominent in N mode, but it can happen in the other modes as well. So what they do is they retard the ignition timing in order to have a little bit extra fuel go into the exhaust, and then as a result you get those nice crackles and pops, which you can hear there. And actually, which I was surprised to find out, I was chatting with Bierman about this, one of Hyundai's development engineers, head of the N program, and he was saying that this will act as anti-lag if you are in N mode and depending on the RPM and throttle position and things like that. So for upshifting, it will maintain that turbo spooling as you shift through it by retarding the ignition timing. So I'm going to probably do a separate video explaining exactly how that works, but very cool that a car at this level of performance is actually coming with anti-lag depending on which mode you're in. So if you're just in regular mode, it's not going to be doing it, but once you put it in N mode, it will be a bit more aggressive with your shifting. It will then retard the timing, dump a bit extra of fuel, and then keep that turbo spooled up. So a very neat feature for a car at this budget level that also is passing emissions. So it's pretty neat that they have somehow figured out how to pass emissions and yet all the while are including an anti-lag system. So how does this thing drive? Well, like I was saying earlier, I was impressed yesterday going around the ring at the relative lack of understeer. This is the performance package, so it does have the smaller anti-roll bar and it does have the limited slip diff up front, but not too bad on understeer, which I was surprised with, and it does a nice job putting the power down. 275 horsepower going to those front wheels, and I don't notice too much. Coming out of a corner there, it's able to put the power down. And also with regards to torque steer, I was chatting with them about this and they were saying they didn't really implement too much to try and eliminate torque steer. They think that it's something that gives the driver feel, and so they didn't want to fully eliminate it. But that said, I did not really feel it all that much yesterday on the track, and driving it now, I still don't feel very much of it. So I feel like the torque steer is well contained, considering you've got 275 going to just two front tires. Now the limited slip diff may be helping out quite a bit there. I have not driven the base version, so I don't know what it's like with the open differential, but here on the performance package I really don't notice any issues from a torque steer perspective. So getting into the different driving elements and how they feel, as far as the throttle, it seems that there's a little bit of jerkiness on the initial tip in, but then after that it's pretty well controlled, and the throttle does change depending on which mode you're in. So I'm in N mode right now, which is the most aggressive, and it's the closest to an on-off switch versus the other modes which are meant to be more linear. So you can change the way that throttle feels. Here in N mode, it kind of has an initial, it pops in and you get that jerkiness initially, but then after that it does feel fairly well controlled. As far as turbo lag, it certainly is noticeable, the first time. If you're at off throttle and then you're planning it, you will feel a bit of a delay between when you put your foot down and when you start to get that torque. Not super bad, and I didn't notice it at all on the track, so it maintains that boost once you're, keeping the revs up. But, if you're driving around the city, you'll notice there is a delay between when you put your foot down and when you actually start to get torque as a result of that turbocharger spooling up. Now, having driven Veloster Turbo in the past, I will say I do like the way that the clutch and shifter feel in this much more than the previous versions which I've driven. Reason being, I feel like you get a bit more feedback from both this shifter as well as the clutch itself. I feel like the experience was fairly numb before, and they've done a nice job of refining that. There is a bit of notchiness to the shifting here. It has a good feel to it, nice mechanical notchiness, and the clutch itself I find very easy to drive. It's simple, it's smooth. You don't get that vibration in first gear. So overall, I do like the manual setup. Okay, let's get on brakes a little bit here. Not a whole lot of travel with the brake pedal, and a nice progressive feel to it. Actually, I like that quite a bit. Yesterday, when I was on the track, I wasn't paying too much attention to it, but I didn't notice fade, and so overall, I wouldn't say I had any problems with it. We're out on the track doing, 25 miles without experiencing really any degradation. Now, that was a 10-minute lap rather than, what this thing is probably capable of far better. So I don't know if you're a better driver, unlike myself, when you start to run into issues with the brakes, but I did not have any issues with it. Did a really nice job yesterday as far as brakes are concerned. So I like them. I think they feel pretty good. Short travel, good progressive feel. They're not too punchy initially, so I like the way that the brakes are. And then finally, just touching on the steering. And I don't have a whole lot to say about the steering, honestly. It's a fairly short ratio, not too much effort, honestly, required. German roads are fantastic, so the nice thing is out here, you're not getting all kinds of bumps and things going through them. You can see how beautifully smooth this road is. But as far as the steering, I wouldn't say there's anything particularly thrilling about it that I really enjoy, but on the other hand, I don't think there's anything really about it that I don't find all that appealing. So the steering is ultimately fine. I think the other aspects of the car shine a bit more than the steering itself. But this car is fun. They haven't told us what pricing will be, but they put a big emphasis on creating something that's affordable. It's going to be segmented somewhere between, the GTI and the Golf R, in that range of cars where there are quite a bit of competition and planted somewhere there in the middle as far as pricing is concerned. But a lot of emphasis put on, making a car that's fun to drive and still affordable. And I would say that they have met that. I have been pleasantly surprised by driving it. I was shocked by going around the ring in 10 minutes. I know that's a long time, but considering it was my first time on the track, and Sabine Schmidt's getting it in 10:08 in a transit van, so I can now boldly claim that I am faster in a Hyundai Veloster R than someone in a transit van around the ring, and I'm sure that's a very impressive stat to everyone out there. As you can see there, you do have a shifter indicator light up on the top of the dash there, letting you know, hey, you need to shift gears. And I do like the gearing in this car as well. I think that's something that they've done nicely. It's aggressive. It's not just looking at, let's purely get that 0 to 60 time. It looks like second gear tops off before you hit 60 miles per hour, somewhere right around just before it. So aggressively geared, and I like that they did that. I don't like cars that get too tall of gearing and then it sucks all the fun out of it. So you do get to shift, have a good time with the gearbox, and get the full potential out of the car with aggressive gearing and putting a lot of torque down to the ground. So as far as any downsides, honestly I have very few complaints about this car. So the one thing is, I don't know how much it costs. I think that's going to play a big role in my opinion on it, is where it ends up falling price wise. The other thing is, I have not driven the base version. So this is the performance package. It has the limited slip differential, it has more power, it has more aggressive gearing. There's a lot of modifications to this car that the base Veloster N does not have. So I think it's certainly worth, at this point in time, getting this car right here, but I have not driven the lower version. I don't know, how watered down it will feel in comparison to this. But overall, I have quite enjoyed driving this. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, of course, feel free to leave those below.